Jon Feinman, how's it going?
It's going well. It's good to see you. Good to be here. And normally I don't get such kind of warm up music to come out. So
No, you like that? I know. I'm trying to we're trying to figure out how to get our graphic with the music and then the countdown timer. But right now I'm just using an old graphic. But it's there's a million things we can do here. So I'm so psyched to have you, man. This is really cool. I don't know if I told you this, but I'm born and raised in South Weymouth. So
okay.
That was home base for me ages ago, and so I'm just really psyched to have you on and to talk about what you're doing, and I'm afraid people are gonna click by this going oh, it's just some weight room personal trainer dude, but there's so much more going on to you than I think what people think. Do you find that do you find that people go how do you explain yourself to people what you do?
Yeah, it's funny you asked that, because we started really just as this weightlifting program, specifically focused on Olympic lifting and getting people, college athletic scholarships and into the Olympics. And we start doing the work, and we've got people who are going in and out of jail. People who are shot and paralyzed. And the idea that weight training was somehow going to solve someone's challenges was ridiculous. But what it did do is give me, and now us, this opportunity to text someone who society literally told us not to, saying, hey, I'm working out at 3 o'clock today, you want to join? And that really gave way to who we are today, which is much more of a social justice organization rooted in a social enterprise that's really built on 4 stages of trust, hope, bridging social capital, and economic mobility. And the community of the gym it's tough to beat, and that's really what makes it.
This is so you are a multi-layered onion, man. There's so much going on. And so where were you born and raised?
Born and raised Amherst, Massachusetts.
Right. So I lived in Springfield for a little while and part of my life. You couldn't get more white and more rural than Amherst, Massachusetts, right?
It's tough. It'd be tough to find.
It'd be tough to find. So where'd you go to high school?
Went to Amherst Regional Public High School, played soccer, went to Bryant University after that, played soccer there. And I actually think soccer has a lot to do with who I am as a person now, and the people I was able to meet through sport and connect with, and the kind of way I was able to immerse in different people's culture and community, and all through sport. It certainly has never left me.
So I'm just curious as to when you got the idea for basically taking a for lack of a better term, and I don't mean to dumb this way down, but a personal training studio into this social justice movement, because you went off, you got your MBA at Babson, right?
Yep.
And did you go to Babson to do this, or when did that all kick in?
It really started in this year of Americorps I did out of undergrad. So 2005, 2006. And it was through soccer I had a chance to meet some people in MS-13, and the program I was in literally told me, don't go near them. They're too dangerous. They're not going to change, so don't waste my time. And I got to meet people as people, not as statistics or labels. And what I saw was not this overwhelming violence and danger. What I saw was overwhelming love, support, togetherness, this belonging and valuing each other when society had clearly devalued who they were as people and reduced someone to a statistic. And after that year, I became a full-time personal trainer. Loved personal training. Went from an Americorps stipend to making $800 a month and trying to live in Boston to all of a sudden making $120,000 a year, and not having to worry about every $2 I spent on a cup of coffee. I'd never forgot about some of the people I had met, and this idea that somehow I could combine weight training and what I felt to be, just much more work I was much more passionate about. So I went to Babson to figure out how to launch a sustainable nonprofit. I spent $120,000 on education to learn that.
I was going to say,
yeah.
Where's the thinking? There was the logic in that one. Come on.
Yeah. So basically I spent $120K to figure out that what I wanted to start was legally not sustainable, which is why we're a 501c3 nonprofit. It's all about sustainable avenues of fundraising, which certainly can exist. Yeah, so I went to Babson in 2010. We got a bootstrap pot model off the ground that same year, and haven't looked back. It's been a wild roller coaster, and I'm excited for the next phase. And this is Chris, by the way, one of our trainers over here.
What's up, Chris?
I don't think he can hear you.
What's up, Chris?
He's saying what's up.
What's going on?
Hey, man. I listen. For all the guys that do the work at InnerCity, like I'm doing this interview with Jon, and I'm just so psyched for the work he's doing with you guys, and being from born and raised just south of Boston, I just love what's going on out there, and so I'm so psyched for you guys, and hope someday I get to meet you guys sometime soon.
Thank you. I appreciate it. We appreciate you. You come down here, get a workout, and put your mask on.
Right. Right on. Nice to meet you, man.
Have a great day. Thank you.
You too.
Thank you. I'll plug you some views too. Chris is also a very talented musician, so if anyone wants to follow him too.
Let's get all that stuff. I'll do all that stuff in the blog post and the show notes and all this stuff. It's funny. I don't normally do these this time of day, so I usually do a lot of the stuff late at night. So, and what I found with these interviews is that they just grow. They just go and they go and they go, and you never know whose desk they're going to end up on or whose headphones are going to be in. So that's sweet. Listen, I want to rewind to just 2 points so I got clear. Like when you got out of college at Bryant and you became a personal trainer, you were making $120 a year as a personal trainer. Did I get that right?
Yeah. So I was 23. It was a nice little change up for me.
That's amazing. Where were you doing that, by the way?
For the first half of the year, I was at a sports club at Sheraton and Braintree. And then the fitness managers, like 3 of those, the fitness manager went to start up his own personal training studio in the south end of Boston. So I went with him to help start that up and just quickly grew a client base and went from there. Yeah,
that's amazing. That's really good. I mean, that's good money for any personal trainer anywhere in the country. So that's a good deal. And with Americorps, like when you did Americorps, can you just explain to people who might not know what Americorps is?
Yeah, it's similar to City Year. They have a bunch of different programs, so it's the Americorps umbrella. The specific program I did was called Athletes in Service to America, which is now merged into Playworks. So this program, they train people to go into schools and in areas that tend to be experiencing higher rates of poverty, have more kind of the impacts of historical inequities. And you go there and you're tutoring in the classroom, you're running recess activities, and then you're also starting up after school sport-based programming as well.
Okay, gotcha. And it was there that people were saying, like, don't hang out with like people of color or people who are in prison or people who are like, what was that? Was that coming from Americorps, but they were in that same, did I get that right?
It was coming more from the school.
Gotcha.
And again, I don't want to kind of generalize any group.
No.
There's specific people within the school, some of the higher ups, but I mean, I think if anything, while it's always been there, I think last year certainly highlighted some of the historical inequities in the way people are seen and devalued systemically as well.
Gotcha. So you go to Babson, you start this gym, and you like, how do you reach out to your first clients? Like, and do I have this business model right? Like, you were basically taking guys like off the street, teaching them Olympic lifting, but then you're turning around and taking those same people and turning them into personal trainers who are then training people who aren't necessarily have that same background. Did I get that right?
Yep, exactly. And I think it's some of the coolest things we get to see is people forming this personal stake in each other's lives, especially when it's 2 people who every surface level indicator would suggest that they should be apart. And when that happens, it's like magic.
That's awesome.
So yeah, that's the exact model.
That's cool. And so you drew that up at Babson, right? So
sort of. It was very far off from that, but we've evolved into that today.
Well, so, and this is what's kind of cool. Like, I saw the ESPN video And that's where and I watched it like 2 or 3 times. Like I was just like, dang, this is really sweet, because someone who's an Olympic athlete like myself and who's done Olympic lifting and who was a strength and conditioning coach for a while in my life, like I totally get this, and I'm just like, this is awesome. Like this is so cool. And as you said, like sport should bring people together, but a lot of time it doesn't. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. like this is where I think, I always say this, like people look at sports and as coaches and stuff, like, especially coaches, we want our coach to be like our priest, our president, our confidant. We want them to be everything. And then things tend to kind of fall apart from that. But this model that you're doing here is, and by the way, for those people who watch the ESPN, it's really tragic when you lost that one dude who was one of your, was he one of your earliest clients or earliest trainers? Who was that?
He was one of the first trainers. He's who I met during that. He was actually the specific person during that year of Americorps that I was told don't go near. And he profoundly changed who I am today. So yeah, and what he went through, it's not lost on me that that's what everyone in our program risks. And yet they have the courage to continue to push forward and overcome barriers and problems that, I have yet to discover. And I don't know if I ever will, the depth of those issues. And yet they're living through it and getting through it.
Do you like, and as a white, middle class, like prep school kid from New England, I can't relate to any of it. Like I want to think that I can. Like I think I want to throw some generalities in terms of like overcoming adversity and things like that. But can you describe like some of the guys can you describe some of what the guys that you have brought into your gym and into your program, like what they go through?
Yeah, I mean, they're dealing with the full weight of the history of this country, every problematic policy, every perverse moral assumption about who someone is. They're people who are facing all the barriers you'd think, plus the extra barriers around safety and security. So, when we look at the problems that people in our program are responding to, it's poverty, it's problematic policy, it's housing, it's racism, it's food access, it's stable homes, mass incarceration that has ripped their families apart before they were even born, before that segregation, before that racial terror and lynching, before that slavery. And you can kind of draw, as Brian Stevenson says, this direct line through. And then you kind of hear what you hear about the streets. And that's the way society would define who's in our program. And yet what I saw, like I said before, streets were rooted in love, togetherness. It's people who are shut out of an economy, whose voice was robbed and devalued. And so they formed their own bonds to help their mothers with rent, to help provide food for their brother and sister. It's very much rooted in that. And yet, because society has shut them out and the economy that they then create to survive, to support each other is illegal, then all of a sudden in the stigma that's added to it, it also ends up involving guns and other illegal activity. And that perpetuates these systems of weaponized fear that justify from the outside unjustifiable actions when you're on the inside and you're looking at, wait, I know what you're saying about this person, but I don't think you understand that this person's whole story starts being 8 years old and seeing his mother crying because she couldn't put food on the table.
Right.
Where else is this person going to go to help his mother out, who he loves?
Right.
That's the start. And I'm speaking specifically of one of our participants who's currently finishing up a 8 to 10 year sentence because he's been deemed an armed career criminal. But that's the start of his story. And if you don't understand how it started, and you keep punishing someone and you keep adding more labels and stigma, we just perpetuate rather than solve the very problems. So I think we're actually all aligned in trying to solve.
So like this blows my mind, because like I'm from your neck of the woods, but now I live in Canada, and I live in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, which is which when I first moved here like 20 years ago, there was like a little bit of a joke about Calgary, which is like it was all white and anybody of color lived in like the northeast quadrant of the city. Now that's not the case. Like I live in a neighborhood in the northwest, and I would say none of my neighbors are white, but they're not like black, like African American. They're like Indian or Chinese or they're from somewhere not Canada, which is as a generality. In Boston, I love the old Bill Burr joke that says like Boston is just a more racist version than New York, which I think is a little unfair, but maybe not. And again, people, it's a joke. I don't want people getting offended by this conversation, but the talk to me about, because in the ESPN video, one of your guys talks about how his buddies who were in jail were like, dude, why don't you just commit some sort of crime so you come back and we can all hang out together? That's basically the gist of it, right? But he says no, and I can't. Is this the guy that lost his life, by the way?
No, that's who you're talking about is Joe, who's actually running one of our gyms now.
That's awesome. But like, okay, for a kid like Joe to have that moment, like where he says, no, this is wrong, right? And I'm going to make better choices, to the general public out there who thinks that that's always the answer. Why isn't that decision making always possible?
Yeah, I think you kind of hit on it when you said choices. You can only make a good choice if you have good options. And a lot of times, if you don't have good options, by default, whatever decision you make is not going to be good. And that's not to rob people of their own agency and accountability. There are people who persevere despite odds that would be next to impossible for almost anyone else. At the same time, we have to understand what society is putting before people, and whether or not the options we would expect someone to take are realistic. So for instance, if you're in a white suburban school that is incredibly well funded, generally speaking, if one of the people there loses their life, they have guidance counselors. Tests are canceled.
Mm-hmm.
What people in our program are going through, the amount of lives and people who they know who have been lost, and yet they're expected to go to school and take a test.
Right.
The fact that you're 8 years old and you're trying to go to school and do well, and your mother's crying because she can't put food on the table.
Right.
The fact that you're already stigmatized because of who your father or brother was. The fact that your father's not around, not because he doesn't love you, but because he's doing a 10+ year sentence for having marijuana, or in some cases, being in a household where someone else had marijuana. Like, these policies have devastated people and communities, and yet they've bonded together in the face of despair and tragedy. And yet we don't recognize, generally speaking, as a society, how pure their love for each other is. I'm reading this book right now by Ben Austin, who's out of UC Chicago, about the Cabrini Green housing projects called High Risers. And the book goes into detail, certainly about a lot of the tragedy that happens, but also people are living there. They were a family. Even if they weren't blood related, the way they would step in and support each other, that's hard to find in most communities. And that's not the stories that we're told. And I think about starting ICW and people saying, are you being safe? Are you being, look, there's a certain amount of risk that, yes, is there, but you can mitigate a lot of that. And that risk is so small for someone like myself. Mm-hmm. People they're loving, they're caring. We should be asking ourselves as a society, how did we let someone fall into this, and or not even let someone? How do we push someone into this? And then how do we start to solve it? And again, I think if we start getting away from like the personal responsibility or not, but just start looking at, what's the circumstance? What's the context? What's the history here? And how do we start to untangle that and just own it? It's look, I'm a white guy in this country. I've inherited just about every privilege. Did I participate in a lot of the historical inequities? No, I wasn't alive. Am I today? Probably, because I don't even know how I'm playing into the systems until I know. And we got to own that.
That's a really interesting topic, because I know, like, when you get into those conversations, it's like, wait a second, I didn't even know. I didn't even know, right? And that's where a lot of people are at, and I don't necessarily think it's fair to blame people for a past that like you said, like I wasn't part of it back then. Like I can't control something I wasn't part of, but all I can do is do something now, maybe to help. Right. Yep. And that's where I like those conversations just to kind of go. But some people get pretty hostile on it and say, like, just because you're white, like, man, like, you've got it. It's like, no, that's because I've met enough white guys in my life that grew up like, Olympic boxers who grew up like, in the same situation in an inner city somewhere, who battled their way out of it. Right. And so there is that conversation of like, we do all have that kind of that self-agency, but I like what you said about you can only make good choices if you have good options. Right. And I think that's really that's really interesting, because I never really thought of it like that. But it makes a ton of sense. What I like about what you're doing is that you're doing your own thing. Like you've created something to help solve an issue, which is giving like an opening to somebody to say, hey, listen, we can get you trained up with a personal trainer certification, and we can get you working like that. Right. Like, I mean, literally, I mean, you can get a certification in a weekend. Right. Like, I mean, how do you put guys through that? And I guess, what's the open door to ICW all the time? Like, because I'm sure you have an open door, or are there some people you're like, yo, I can't even have that guy in here? Like, how's that work for you guys?
Yeah, so we, on the safety kind of side of the logistics, one reason why we've been able to do this work is that we've taken the safety of people in our program first and foremost. So it's why our gyms aren't publicly disclosed. It's why, for us to really be able to scale the way we want in Boston, we have to open up at least 2 to 4 more sites. And it's why, as we look to expand to Chicago, the next year and a half is really about understanding the dynamics. We want the gym to be somewhere where people can come and relax and be safe, if only for an hour a day, and not have to worry about everything they're constantly worried about anyway.
Can we just I want to clarify this, because you have like guys, and do you have any girls yet working for you?
We do have women on our staff. We've worked with a couple of young women. We focus a lot on young people where those kind of stigmas and circumstances led to gun violence. So it does end up being primarily men. Okay.
Now, are all of these guys like they're like, for lack of it, they're convicts? Like, is that how you, like, what do you, like, how do you describe these guys?
Yeah, so there are people who generally have done time. In fact, I think it's like 98%. The only people who haven't are some of the younger brothers of people who are like 12 and 13. But we're really focused on people who have those additional barriers around safety, and therefore a lot of programs either won't work because they either can't get there safely. People will screen them out. And for us, we're kind of set up to work with people that most groups, most organizations might not, because we'll pick guys up. We'll drive them to and from the gym. We make sure we don't mix people who have issues with each other.
Like gang related stuff.
Yeah. And it becomes a driver for kind of how many gyms we need to open up in each city that we go to, and make it work.
Will you end up having like gang gyms? Like, is that kind of how that, like, how's that going to work? Like,
it's it's interesting because the dynamics, they keep changing. So
Yeah.
it's part of it too. And the part what I kind of always go back to history is that kind of like defining a gang, the amount of people in our program that have said this, and always without being asked a question from me, the amount of people who said, I didn't know I was a gang member until a judge told me I was.
Really?
Like we have to kind of look at the system and because when you do that, all of a sudden, if you're a judge, if you're a prosecutor, you can add time on to someone's sentence. And it can be as simple as what street someone was born on or who their brother was. And so the way we've defined gang in this country as a legal classification almost is also part of the problem. So, again, a lot of the people in our program, they don't want other people to fall into the same life they did. They want it to be easier for the next person.
Like truly, that's something that's at the core of all these guys, is that they're like, yo, don't follow my footsteps. Like, is that like that's part of that love side of it, which is kind of what I don't think a lot of people understand is like when you describe like these communities, these typically like inner city communities, black communities where, like you said, dads have been incarcerated and kids end up going down that path. Like this is what's kind of weird. Part of the love of it is like people going like, hey, don't be like me. But would you also agree that there's like this side of it that's also like, we don't want you to be too successful? Is there a bit of that?
So I would have a slight twist on that, having seen it a lot. And that is that what it ends up being is that because so many people have looked out for each other, as that success can happen, everyone wants to come up at the same exact time. And it's almost kind of like the if you're on an airplane, you put the mask on yourself first. There is this kind of difficulty sometimes that, hey, I looked out for you and let's share this small pot and I'll be a little bit ahead versus, let me get to here and then we're gonna get the next person to kind of follow. Again, everyone's an individual. It's one thing that I think is more kind of false and perpetuated in movies and news and there's not this kind of like, hey, once you're in, you're in. It's more about you all genuinely love each other, so why would I want to leave my group of friends? That's really more where it's coming from than anything else.
To use a fitness analogy, right? It's like that idea, like, hey, if you're overweight and all your friends are overweight, and then all of a sudden you want to get fit, right? And you lose your friends because you no longer like them, right? There's a bit of psychological drag back down by yourself, but there's also a little bit of psychological drag from everybody else around you going like, hey, we don't want you too skinny, right? Because then you're going to make us feel weird, right? Which is really what it's a level of jealousy, right?
Yeah, I think it's jealousy. And I think it's also rooted in just pain and this desire, like, hey, I want to succeed too. And kind of being close enough to see it, but not quite there. It can also be kind of a difficult point in time too. And so I think, it's not without difficulties, but again, even what is difficult always, from what I've seen, has been rooted in this kind of care for each other, even if it manifests in something that's less than ideal.
Right. Like something's better than nothing.
Yeah.
Right. Like, so with your clients, okay. So with your clients who come to so these are people obviously that can afford to hire a personal trainer. And now with COVID, like you're doing everything one-on-one, I would think.
Yep. And actually 80% is now virtual for us. So it's been incredible. We've been able to sign up clients and companies from coast to coast. We actually grew by about 37% in our personal training sessions last year, which has been awesome. That means more incomes and more jobs for people in our program.
Wow, that's awesome. That's really cool. Who would have thunk it, right?
Yeah, it's a credit to our team and trainers. They really stepped up. The first couple months, March and April, is really just about stabilizing last year, and then we did, and we're like, you know what? There's no reason why we can't grow in this. There's actually some advantages to the virtual world.
There's some benefits to COVID, and when you've got well, and listen, not to make this sound trite, but what you're doing is a bit of it's a marketing differentiator. Like if you were just going to look at it from a fitness business standpoint, to boil it down to that, and I don't mean to take anything away from what you're doing, but obviously, like, hey, it's like, one, it removes all the safety concerns somebody might have, right? Like, why do you think people are diverting those dollars then to you now during COVID than they weren't before?
I think one is a lot easier to train with us now. I think two, certainly people, we're 400 plus years too late on this, but people are finally more accepting or acknowledging that, hey, there are some issues in this country that we have not dealt with or settled our kind of debts and made things equal, so we can start to talk about equalities. You can't really get there without equity. And so, I think certainly our mission is really resonating with people right now.
Do you think here's a tough question. Do you think there's a level of guilt that people have?
Yeah, yes, I think there is. And I think, for us to get to a healthy place as a society, we should do things less out of guilt and more out of love. And so I think what starts is that, someone's guilty and they're looking to get involved in something, but then they know someone. I talked earlier about, you get this personal training is incredible, because I don't think there's any other career like it that flips power dynamics, where someone who, take myself when I was 22, I was training people who are Harvard professors, CEOs of companies, people who are there's no other situation where I'm telling that person what to do.
Right.
And yet they're listening to me.
Right. They're paying you.
and so now you look at with ICW and our trainers, is that, people value them as a fitness professional, but then that relationship forms void of social hierarchies and with power dynamics flipped, and you just truly get to know and appreciate each other as equals. And when that happens, you get that personal stake in each other's lives. And when that happens, you go from guilt to all of a sudden purpose and resolve. It's the decisions we would make for our friends and family. When you get that personal stake in each other's lives, become the same decisions you're going to make for someone else, because you know and care about each other. And you stop looking at it from what we've been taught to see or say or do, and instead from first hand, deep and personal knowledge.
Now, with you're basically putting out an olive branch to give people, but you've been at this now for a long time. How long have you been actually running ICW?
11 years.
That's crazy.
We're in our 12th year. Yeah. I think it's a good thing, but it does not feel like it's been 11 years. So I think it's a good sign.
I'm not one to dwell on the negative, but what has disappointed you about people? Both of like the people who work, like not necessarily work for you now, but maybe people who've come and gone. What disappoints you on that side, and what also disappoints you? And I think I know we're going to go with this one, but what disappoints you on the client side?
So I guess I can kind of sum it up together, as I think there's some overlap here. 11 years ago, so in 2010, January 5th, we launched. I went into this with kind of the most wide-eyed, optimistic, idealistic attitude. Here we're gonna come and we're gonna borderline white savior complex. We're going to solve people's problems. Then you start doing the work and you start to understand that you have no clue and you never will. And there's a power to that, though, because when you understand that you don't know, and I would argue that none of us know for another individual, we are all singular. You're forced to do an important thing, and that's listen. And when you listen with intent to actually change your behavior and create action around that listening, now that's valuing someone. And when you start to do that, when I started to do that, I started to see a depth that I never could have seen to the issues that we as a society face, that the individuals in our program face. And over the years, we've dealt with protests. We've dealt with hate mail. We've dealt with naysayers, and at the same time, we've dealt with people who have supported us in ways that have been incredible, not just financially, but also just by being a part of the ICW community. And so I guess where I'm going with this is that I turned from this wide-eyed optimist to someone who's pretty cynical.
Really?
I don't see society genuinely changing for a very long time. We can do what we want with policy, but if you look at the history of this country, policy is just met with new forms of oppression. And so the only real change, I think, I actually think James Baldwin said this, so I'm by no means trying to get credit, is moral change. And again, that brings me back to this personal stake in each other's lives. And what gives me hope is that I'm in the gym and I get to see people connecting, genuinely connecting, who otherwise would never be around each other. And I see behavior changing. I see options changing. And therefore choices changing. And while I'm cynical about society, the capacity that individuals have to change and change fast, that it leads us into kind of where we want to even go in the next 5-10 years, which is, you reach enough individuals, you empower enough individuals, you amplify voice and agency, and this ripple starts to form. That change moves from individual to someone's families. Now you're talking and behaving differently. And from family, it moves to community. And ultimately, you reach enough people. And now that ripple starts to extend out to society. And I'm not just talking about the people in our program. I'm talking about our personal training clients. I'm talking about people like myself. And that's, I think, where the true power is. And also, to kind of answer your question, it's what's disappointed me. And at the same time, it's what's made me so helpful despite becoming more cynical than when I started.
Sometimes from cynicism, you can almost relax a bit because you realize they're not gonna. I'm just gonna do this. I'm gonna keep going in this direction. I don't have to worry about all these guys, and I think as we get older, this cynicism tends to kind of creep in more and more because you just learn more about people. Right? You just go hey, it's all good. You're good. I'm good. We're all good. And we're all going down our own path. Some people go down weirder paths than others, but still it's just all right, let's just do this. So you've got 2 gyms in Boston. Okay. And I know you've got a call in 22 minutes about going to Chicago. What's the big vision now?
Yeah. So the big vision now, it's really around this amplifying the voice and agency of people in our program, growing ICW to a size where it's a platform that can help create that ripple that extends from individual to community to society. And what that specifically means is, opening up anywhere from 2 to 6 more sites in Boston over the next 5 years. Getting Chicago off the ground, spending, like I said, the next year or so really researching it. We actually, in this virtual world, we were able to partner with an organization called CRED and start getting a couple people in Chicago certified as trainers to work with some virtual clients that we've signed up in Chicago. And so, this year I'll get to take some trips, hopefully, depending on the pandemic and vaccines, and get to know some of the trainers that we're working with virtually, get to know where they live and the dynamics of Chicago, get to know some partners, community partners, as well as hopeful funders. And in the next 5 years, ideally kind of research, launch and grow Chicago and get complete reach in Boston, where we can work safely in person with anyone, no matter where they're from in Boston, so that we don't have to worry about those kind of safety dynamics, and we'll have a location for anyone.
Now, is the safety issue, is it basically just kind of, is it gang related always, or what else is there?
For us, it's very much that.
Okay.
You know, it's a lot of times it can also be interpersonal. You know, it's something happened and you know, there's some real, like I said, pain and trauma that has happened. And again, I think a lot of this, it's rooted not in the individual, but in the problems we've laid at people's feet, and you know, this fear both ways. And you know, when fear goes unchecked, it turns to rage, and that's not just people in our program, that's anyone. And it's really about, like I said before, you know, you establish trust, and all of a sudden someone's not trying to solve challenges on their own. They have someone else to lean on. And again, it's not about doing anything for someone. It's about partnering so you can be with and alongside someone to solve those challenges together.
Do you, on the programming piece, just to kind of talk from the programming and training side of things, like what do you, and you mentioned cred there, like what else do you know, how does somebody like come off the street and work for you? Like, is it word of mouth? Is it they hear about you, like they come out, they reach out to you? Like, what's that process like?
A lot of it is word of mouth. We started by partnering with street workers and getting to meet some of the groups of people who you know, kind of were facing the most stigma. I was also working at a juvenile detention center for people serving gun-related charges, and kind of just getting to know people. When you earn trust, and that doesn't happen overnight, when you earn trust, you see what society doesn't. And you start to see, I'll even use myself as an example. I was, when I first came to Boston, told not to cross certain streets. In turn, I told other people to do it. I didn't think anything of it at the time. Now that I know people, you know, on the quote unquote other side of the street, I will never say that again, because I am perpetuating these systems of segregation and racism when I say that. When you look at South Boston, people don't seem to mind Whitey Bulger and everything he did too much. He's almost looked at as a hero.
Icon.
It's insane. That guy individually has done more damage than all the people who we're vilifying now. And yeah, again, he's even portrayed in movies as this like anti-hero, or whatever the expression is. He's like the Tony Soprano of real life.
Right.
So, you know, it's really just about, if you are in trust with someone, they start spreading the word, and you just start doing the program with authenticity and integrity, and you know, the people you're working with, they become your best ambassadors, and you grow from there.
Gotcha. Who do you turn away?
Yeah, so this is a weird one, but we do sometimes turn away people who don't have the added barriers around safety. And the reason being is that, you know, we are still a very small organization.
Who don't have.
Yeah. So there's so many great organizations in Boston. We can only work with so many people.
I see. Yeah.
That, you know, our resources and capacity, we have to be really focused. And the other part too is that sometimes when people are not as aware of those safety barriers and they start spreading the word, and all of a sudden they tell someone who actually shouldn't know, now we're actually putting people at risk. So it's kind of twofold on that as to why sometimes we'll actually turn people away and we'll suggest other programs. And it's been weird because sometimes you have people saying, wait, so you're saying I'm not, bad enough? We're like, no, that's not quite it.
We're not helping, Jon. We're not helping.
So yeah, it's again, those conversations can go a lot better when you have the right partners around you and you can find a program that's going to work really well.
Now, are there enough programs for people who are stuck in these situations? If they want to bust out, they can get there?
No.
No.
And not only are there enough programs, but we're also not spending enough. So we'll spend as an economy, we'll spend about $80 to $140 billion a year on the prison system. Right. In Massachusetts in 2018, the cost of incarcerating someone was $70,856. And yet, God forbid, as a nonprofit, your cost per student goes above $10K. What we're going up against is, and I actually somewhat, I'm sure a lot of people in nonprofits would agree with me on this, but because of the dynamics at play in nonprofits, we as a collective don't do a good job advocating for us. We are expected to solve some of the world's biggest economic and moral problems on a budget that no reasonable company would ever agree to.
Right.
And yet we do it. So I think part of it is, as a leader and in the nonprofit world, we need to do a better job saying, look, if we're willing to spend $80 billion to $140 billion a year locking people up, we should be willing to spend $40 billion a year to keep people out. I would argue we should be willing to spend more money than we spend on incarcerating someone. But without even having to go there, if we even just spend half the money, we'll see some progress. But we're spending like not even 1% of that on programming. So
my Canadian son, my 15-year-old Canadian son, is all over through the election last year. He's all about those statistics, and he's like, dude. It's like, why? Why? It just makes no sense. Listen, I know I've got you for 13 more minutes before you got to bolt, and I so appreciate that. I want to run you through a quick little there's a show called Inside the Actors Studio that ran for years. I don't know if you ever saw it, but I've kind of developed my own little my little questionnaire at the end. I just want to run you through it quick. So these are some quick answers, and just to kind of get it. And I've got a blog post that I'm writing that's gonna fill in some of the questions that you already filled out for me about your personality and things like that. I love that. That was really cool to see. So tell me, let's start with this one. What's your perfect day look like?
Oh, perfect day. So perfect day. I wake up. First thing I do is go surfing. Actually, no. First thing I do is make my Nespresso because I am addicted to that thing. That was game changing when I got one of those a year and a half ago. Then I go surfing. I come back. I eat some breakfast. I read a book for a little while. I go to the gym, do some work, go back out surfing in the afternoon, come home, have a nice dinner, kick my legs up and read and watch some TV.
Where do you surf around Boston?
So I'm driving through Weymouth a lot to go to Nantasket Beach. Nice. I also go to Good Harbor Beach, Second Beach in Rhode Island. I mean, a lot of it is depending on where the swell and waves are coming from. Sure. So Magic Seaweed kind of dictates where I'll be driving.
So do you have many of those perfect days?
Not enough. No. I think it's kind of like a blessing and curse. There's nothing I'd rather be doing. And it's hard for me to turn my brain off. So generally speaking, I'm in the gym somewhere between 7 and 8 in the morning. One of the advantages of COVID is that we're actually, with all the virtual training, I'm leaving at 5. It used to be I wouldn't leave till 7 or 8 at night.
Yeah.
And I love it here. So it's not so much of a complaint, but the perfect day where I get to do that in balance with surfing and everything else. It doesn't happen too much, but sometime soon.
So it kind of answers this like the next six I had, so you ruined them all. But I guess like what turns you on like creatively, spiritually, or emotionally, or is it really this whole thing?
Yeah, it's walking around the gym floor. It's getting some whether it's Olympic lifts or push-ups, pull-ups, or even just like 45 minutes of curls and bench press, so we can show off muscles at the beach, or and get someone back the next day. But it's the moments on the floor and with our team and participants and clients. That's what excites me beyond anything else.
That's awesome. So then what turns you off about all this?
And I guess I pause because the reason why I pause is that what turns me off when I get through it is also what makes me more committed. And it's the moments where you just feel the weight of it. And look, I also say that realizing that the weight of what people are in our program are going through far outweighs any issue I'm ever going to face. But the weight of trying to grow an organization, of seeing people who you care about have to battle through things that you're never going to have to, and trying to figure out, what can we do to get through this together? And then, again, there's the tragic moments as well when you lose someone, and whether that's to the streets or jail. At the same time, you get through those moments. And as a leader, I think anyone, we probably don't talk about it, but you've got those moments where you're just questioning, can I really do this? Am I going to be able to accomplish what we want to and need to? But then you get through it, and you end up, at least for me, it becomes my reason why. It's those tragic moments that is a reminder of how incredible what everyone else in our program is doing and accomplishing, despite knowing that those outcomes are just as real. And that just makes me so kind of honored and humbled to get to be in this work and journey together with the people at ICW, participants, team, and clients. So, but those are the moments that certainly, you get them, you go through them, and they're there.
Here's a fun one for you. What's your favorite curse word?
Oh man, I drop the F word a lot. So I feel like it's like salt. You put it on anything and it's just better. It brings I think someone told, a chef who trains with us told me, like, salt is a flavor enhancer. It brings out the flavor.
Yeah.
That's how I feel about the F word.
It's just a flavor enhancer. I love it. That's really good. How much sleep do you need to kind of excel through all this?
So how much sleep I need, I'm pretty sure that if I could, I would probably need like 8 hours of sleep a night. Generally, I'm probably up for 2 hours in the middle of the night, and I'll get I'm pretty good at giving myself enough time to have an opportunity to get about 7 hours of sleep, but I'm almost always up in the middle of the night for a couple hours before I can get back to sleep.
You need a whoop strap, man.
You know what? I've heard that. So
best thing ever. I'll send you my link.
my concern though is that if I put it on, do I end up just lying there thinking, oh, it's gonna catch me?
I've been like, I really love mine. And it it's because there's a lot of other indicators too it gives you, which is really, really cool. I'm a huge fan of my whip strap, man. Like it's been a game changer for me in a lot of ways, which is really, really good. So out of like, Oprah has this thing where she wrote a book called What I Know for Sure. What does Jon Feinman know for sure?
I know for sure that I don't know. And therefore I'm committed to learning, to listening, to evolving. That is at least what comes to mind.
So who most inspires you?
It's hard to
Pick one.
find one person, but every year we've got people who are celebrating the holidays at home for the first time in years, sometimes in over a decade. We've got people who kind of just nonchalantly tell us, like, I've never been out of jail this long. Those are the moments that just brings it home in a really subtle but meaningful way. And so, again, I kind of talked about earlier, the opportunity to be on the floor with people on our program, with our staff and team. They all inspire me.
That's awesome. So last one. If heaven exists, what do you want to hear God say when you walk through the pearly gates?
5-star wave report, and the beach is a 30-second walk to your left. That's all I'd like to hear.
That's fantastic. You're like, finally, I get to go surfing.
Yeah, I don't even have to think about that one.
That's awesome. That came out really quick. That was like there was not even a hesitation there. Listen, Jon Feinman, InnerCityWeightlifting.org. Way more than a gym. Like, I don't know. Do you have a tagline? Like, do you have like some sort of slogan like that?
Changing lives while changing your own.
There you go. Like, it's just an awesome story. Like, you're doing great stuff. I can't believe it's been 11 years now. Like, I feel like totally late to the party. I'm like, but I wish you all the best in Chicago and beyond. Like, holy smokes, I'll be following what you're doing. If anybody who hears this or sees this, if you know people in the Chicago area that can kind of help this project move ahead, then by all means reach out. Like, I don't know what else I can do there, and or if you just want to donate, buy some merch. You got some sweet merch, actually. Big fan of that baseball T-shirt there. I think I'm going to grab one of those. But yeah, Jon, really appreciate the time. Thanks so much, and I wish you all the best, man. Great stuff.
Thank you for having me. This is great, and really appreciate the opportunity to be on today.
Awesome. Any day. Any day. All right. So thanks everybody for watching. Thanks everybody for listening. If you're on the YouTube or on the podcast or on my any page where you see this, do me a favor, hit a like, leave a comment, and it helps us kind of keep all the algorithms working, all that good stuff. But again, Jon, great stuff. Take care, and to everybody, I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.
Thank you so much.